So go and find the full stories, which are on our webpage. Also sign up for our brand new newsletter if you would like to receive Hromadske International's weekly highlights. The sign-up box is on the upper right-hand side of the site, en.hromadske.ua. Also follow us on Twitter and Facebook, search Hromadske International. We are there 24/7 for you. Ukraine's largest independent English-language newspaper, the Kyiv Post, had been sold to Odesa multi-millionaire and Syrian native Adnan Kivan. Kivan, who bought the paper for significantly more than $3.5 million, asking price from billionaire Mohammad Zahoor, will become Kyiv Post's third owner in the publication's 22 years. But the Syrian native, whose assets include a construction company and a TV station in Odesa, is a controversial figure in Ukraine, though not that much known. Kivan had faced accusations of involvement with both Russian-backed separatists in eastern Donbass as well as the Syrian war. But despite assurance from Kivan, the Kyiv Post now faces the question of whether it will be able to retain its editorial independence it's famous for. In the studio, we are joined by the paper's chief editor, Brian Warner, with whom we're pretty much sure that the editorial policy is independent, though, Brian, the publication made an investigation on your new owner. We have this new issue. Really, what are your concerns? What you have more or less an editorial position to say before you start to work with Mr. Kivan?
Oh yeah, Natalia, thanks for having us here. We appreciate the support, the attention. Well, we're shocked. I mean, you can be 100% sure we've been editorially independent, and that goes all back to our founding in 1995 as Ukraine's English language paper. That's been the policy. Editorial independence means the journalists decide what is the news and how to present it. Obviously, that's a big concern for us. We were shocked. It happened very well. We knew that Mohammad Zahoor was looking to sell for some time. But when it happened very quickly. It happened during a single meeting that Zahoor had with Mr. Kivan, and it happened at a price that I was, well, I'm rather impressed with the price, but there are a lot of questions about what he's going to do with the paper. I'm waiting to meet with him right now. So far, I've only had like one 5-minute conversation with him by telephone. He was ill. He told me he believes in democracy, strong against corruption. He wanted to see more coverage of the Syrian situation. He's from Syria. He's against Assad. But beyond that, we don't know what he's going to do with the paper.
Really? So can you really just say, so how fast did your team had learn about that? So it was like more or less very fast decision. What did Mr. Zahoor said? And really, did Mr. Kivan call you, or you tried to reach him out?
I tried to reach out to him several times, and by phone and by text. He did call me back as I was on the street, and it happened. It was just at blazing speed, because I've been the acting CEO for some days now. I was given documents to sign to transfer the assets. That happened the same day. We learned who Mr. Kivan was. I never knew him, unfortunately, but after you start looking into it, everybody in Odesa knows him. He's one of the wealthiest business people in Ukraine. As I understand it, he has other media assets, and he's trying to increase his investments in Kyiv. So I think I'm told he wants a stronger Kyiv presence, and he also has had some troubles with rumors and allegations and investigations of him. So I think he also sees, like many owners, as the media as a defense mechanism. In the best of all worlds, he will invest in the Kyiv Post. He will allow us to retain our strong and independent voice. Of course, we're concerned, you know, obviously, because the Kyiv Post has been a target for politicians throughout its history, because we've taken very honest and critical stands against corruption and so forth. So we've been a target for elimination, shall we say, from the media scene for quite some time. And, you know, we're only a year before the election. So obviously there's some political concerns here, waiting to hear from the owner himself.
What have you learned about Mr. Kivan during this time? Yes, he's known in Odesa, but he's more or less not known outside of this big southern town. You know, any politicians is blamed to be dubious in Ukraine, because that's how the business is done. So really, what are the concerns? What are the weak, because often the weak points of the owner later become the weak points for the media company.
Well, we know that he's been, he's been very successful in construction. We know that, and for 2 decades. We also know, something about the media, the TV station that he has there. We also know he has ties to politicians. That by itself is not a bad thing. I mean, business people need ties to politicians.
Which politicians? We knew about his connection to Mr. Trukhanov,
right,
who was the Odesa mayor and then later accused to have a Russian citizenship, and at the beginning being also close to the President Poroshenko.
Yes, we've heard all those same things. We've heard he was close to Trukhanov, the mayor, that they did deals together, that they got approvals. We heard he's close to Sergei Kivalov, the notorious
Remind
MP,
about this person.
Opposition bloc, who is, long, probably the most famous suspect in rigging, accused of rigging the election in 2004 that triggered the Orange Revolution. We know that, we hear that Channel 7 is pro-Poroshenko. We hear he likes Tymoshenko. But, what's concerning to us is that, business people in this country, because of the connection between business and politics, they do have connections. What we're interested in is not that whether he has connections or is for somebody or against somebody, but actually will allow us to write the news as we see it, honestly, without fear or favor, without any partisan bias, just the way the journalists see the story. The value comes not from our computers or our equipment, it comes from the people, the reputation, the asset, and our readers will not accept a political PR rag, or they will not accept jinza, they will not accept any of these compromises on editorial independence that I think other stations have made.
What are the safeguards for your team, and where are you looking? What would you read as kind of a, you still haven't talked to Mr. Kivan about the paper,
right,
about the editorial policy of the paper, but really, what would be for you, don'ts and does? What would be? How would you build the strategy?
Well, ultimately, it's up to the advertisers, the subscribers, and readers to defend us. But we'll know very soon whether he wants an independent newspaper or he doesn't want an independent newspaper, very quickly. And there's nothing we can really do. It is his newspaper. We built this brand, and we built the reputation, and we enjoy high levels of trust. We consider it sacred, a sacred trust to the public. We hope he does as well.
High-level politicians about the media situation in Ukraine and to raise all our concern. Hromadske has also issues with the pressure from the politicians, and we always stand by our standard and values. And I know that the president himself is extremely critical of Kyiv Post. He doesn't, in particularly accusing the paper of kind of being panicking when it's not yet, when it's too early to panic, of overdoing the level of repression which is happening here, of sometimes running the, kind of portraying Ukraine in more black colors than white, especially knowing that Ukraine is struggling for the support of the investors. But really, what would you say on that? What would you say on the people who say that sometimes Kyiv Post is really maybe a bit overdoing the threats?
Well, I don't think we're overdoing the threats at all. And what we do, in a democracy, the media's role is to hold those into power accountable. And what we do out of love for Ukraine, not out of hate. We want this to be a better country. We live in it, we work in it. Most of the staff are Ukrainian, but the record is clear. I mean, there's been no rule of law. There's been no significant improvement in the investment climate. There have been no prosecutions or convictions of anybody for high-level corruption. Looks like a lot of deals with oligarchs have been made, which goes counter to the de-oligarchization. A lot of people's hopes and dreams have been dashed, and they blame Poroshenko for the power. If he doesn't recognize that, listen, most Ukrainians don't read the Kyiv Post. They do not, but they're not supporting Poroshenko because they understand what's going on. They understand the disappointment in his record. So if anybody thinks that getting rid of, and by the way, Representative Poroshenko did try to buy us. We have a long history of this. Kurchenko, Yanukovych's guy, attempted to buy us. Firtash attempted to buy us. Firtash sued us for libel. Yanukovych's agriculture minister got me fired the first time for refusing to censor a story. So we have a long history, going back to Kuchma time and the Melnichenko tapes, of irritating politicians. Why? Because we're telling the truth as we see it. Now, whether we're right or wrong, whether we make mistakes or not, that's, we're very accurate. I think we're very fair. But sometimes we can be harsh, but our mistakes are honest mistakes. And I have to tell you, we don't all do politics. We do business. We do entertainment. We cover the war. We've covered the revolution. So we're here, we're part of the community. The Kyiv Post is not going to become the Prague Post or the Washington Post. We're going to stay. And if we're going to stay as independent. And if we're not, I know that...
and if not?
If not, I know that there is a demand and a market for independent journalism. And we will, we'll have to find a new place where we can practice that.
Thank you. Brian Booner, and editor-in-chief of just sold Kyiv Post.